Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining How the Crisis is Reshaping the Beauty Supply Chain with Steve Dodd, SVP US Operations at Meiyume. As a reminder, if you have any questions throughout the conversation, to please submit them using the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen. Here's your host, Deborah Weinswig, CEO and founder of Coresight Research.
Thank you so much, Drew, and thank you all for joining us for the Future of the Supply Chain with Steve Dodd. Coresight has continued to host these dynamic forums since early March as a platform to discuss opportunities and challenges as all of our businesses continue to evolve in ways only once imagined. Speaking of, we have a research report series entitled Retail Innovators, which has covered everything from home furnishings to beauty brands and retailers. The most recent edition, which is featured on our website today, is Apparel Technologies. We will ultimately be publishing an ebook with all these different topics as chapters to provide a roadmap for technologies and solutions to adapt in this ever-changing environment. I'm very excited to have Steve here with us today. He truly is at the epicenter of everything Coresight focuses on in the beauty sector, as you'll hear when we go through his detailed introduction. He currently serves as the SVP of US Operations at Meiyume. Steve heads up the technology team at Meiyume, which is driving the digital transformation within the business teams located around the world. He also leads the retail solutions practice within the group, focused on delivering capabilities to clients in the beauty industry to drive consumer engagement and deliver unique insights for brands and retailers to create better products and experiences, which is increasingly important in today's day and age. Steve is presently also driving the growth of the business in the Americas market for Meiyume, focusing on the packaging, turnkey, and retail solutions markets. Steve's distinguished career includes his extensive knowledge of digital technologies and how they can be used to drive changes at all levels of the organization across industries from luxury retail to ready-mixed concrete to beauty, both in the online and offline markets. He was previously at Ralph Lauren Asia Pac, where he helped to lead their future technology vision. We are very honored to have him here with us today. So Steve, thank you so much for joining us. Our first question is, given this really kind of pivotal and significant digital and automation shift so far this year, what has the industry been able to achieve that you would have thought would have taken years to accomplish?
Well, good morning. Thanks very much for that introduction. And thank you for having me this morning as well. Yeah, I think, certainly one of the first things that we saw really happen when the lockdown started, the beauty industry isn't as seasonal as some other retail channels. And so they tend to be, much more focused on specific promotional campaigns around the big, the big selling periods of Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, Father's Day, etc. And so what we saw, very quickly was that the supply chain was disrupted, through the pandemic. The beauty supply chain is quite complex, rather than having, necessarily one separate, one individual company be able to actually complete all of the process to make a particular product. Tends to be kind of spread out quite often. So, components are made by one company who ship it to somebody else, who then assembles it and then sends it to somebody else who's got the formula, who fills it. Very quickly, what we saw was that disruption into the supply chain was quite painful. So as soon as Italy shut down, which is where a lot of the raw materials are made for the beauty industry, instantly the US was impacted, even though at that point the US, wasn't in a lockdown at that point. So product was stuck in multiple locations all over the world. Of course, when it works, it's easy, right? Brands they don't really care about what's going on in the world. But as soon as the brakes went on in one place, in Italy particularly, it just fell into absolute chaos. And most brands suddenly realized that they built this very complicated supply chain. And now it was very difficult for them to actually do anything with the people that they had internally. And so then, they really then started to come back to us and say, can you help us, get this stuff moved? Where have you got capacity? Where are there capabilities? Plug the holes for us and pull it all together and coordinate that. It wasn't really, I wouldn't say it was a technology initiative, but I think going forward, if the brands want to continue to maintain these complex supply chains, that they're going to have to put more investment into technology in order to manage it. I think on the, on the front end, obviously stores closed. Beauty is very much a touch and feel industry. So as soon as the stores closed, people are obviously not going into stores, not trying products. That slowed down the revenue on the front end, and you've seen all the earnings calls with the beauty industry. They're all off between 20 and 30%. But I think as things then started to come back, where we're seeing retail opening up, of course the big concern was around touching. So the kind of the dirty word, if you like, of the beauty industry is about testers. Everywhere has testers. People historically have always kind of said, well, I don't really want to touch that. I don't know who used it before me. Now with the pandemic, of course, that's just gone completely. No testers, don't want to touch it. So, for us, being able to create a capability where people could still test, but do that safely without physically touching products or touching equipment, but be able to still get a sample of the product and be able to test it.
I mean, Steve, you are very early in this, kind of whole digitization really of the beauty industry. And, this idea that, consumers want intelligence about what they're purchasing, but really in a contactless, manner.
Yeah.
What are you seeing? Like, what are your clients interested in right now? And how have you, continued to innovate during this time to offer them solutions?
It's quite funny that, a lot of these solutions that we're offering, we've been offering them for the last, 3, 4, 5 years. They're not new capabilities. One of the areas that we put a lot of focus on recently is around, embedding technology into the packaging. So, as you explained, as a business, we do everything from product formulation all the way through to point of sale, in physical retail. So with the packaging, that gives us the opportunity to embed technologies like, QR codes and NFC and RFID into the packaging, and then use that to create a connection point for consumers to be able to interact with the product, get a lot more information about the consumer, pull them into, CRM programs and loyalty programs with the brands, etc. We've been selling these technologies for, quite a while. Some brands have adopted it, many haven't. Suddenly, of course, now everybody wants to have a touchless capability to interact between the product and the consumer. Now everybody's coming and saying, hey, that presentation, could you just come and do that again for us? So we're seeing a lot of that, now them wanting to adopt that technology, because obviously even within a physical retail location, consumers are very mobile savvy now. So you can imagine just touching the product with your phone takes you to a branded website where you can get all the information that you want without having to talk to a sales associate. So the social distancing, plus you're now creating a direct connection with that consumer. So these kind of technologies now are, we're getting a lot of demand for that from our clients.
How are you thinking about, we've had many conversations these recent weeks around holiday and just, kind of from a supply chain perspective, delivery in December. What are you seeing in terms of, different approaches that retailers are taking to address that? And then also what's hot right now?
Yeah, I think, pretty early on, we could see that most of our clients, as I say, because they're not, they're very much focused on specific programs. And, the holiday season is the biggest revenue period for the beauty industry, as it is for a lot of industries, obviously. We could see that what happened was that they started to basically focus, kind of defocus other projects. So Mother's Day, Easter, etc., got, basically put on hold very quickly. And really then kind of say that they were going to put all of their focus into the holiday season launches. Those activities really don't start until September. So then that kind of lined up with a lot of these announcements you see, you know, with beauty brands saying, oh, our offices are closed until September for the COVID. But actually, it's just, it allows them then to basically shut down everything and reduce their costs as much as they possibly can, but then bring everybody back in September to kind of really focus on that holiday sale. Again, because the products are not seasonal, it's very easy to take a fragrance you were going to launch in spring this year and just move it to next year. So I think, you know, we saw a delay in the things that we were going to do early on in the year pushed into next year. Holidays, I think, is going to be critical for the industry. And I think, you know, once we get into the October timeframe, as we head towards Halloween, Thanksgiving in November, we'll start to see what's happening in retail. We'll start to see what's happening in inventory through the supply chain. And, you know, I think that would still then lead to, as we get into December, you know, starting to see brands starting to make decisions around whether they're even going to launch products next year based on where their inventory is. You know, this is product that has a shelf life if it's been made already. If it hasn't been made, it's components that are sitting in in warehouses. So, you know, they have quite a bit of agility, you know, on managing that time frame, and so can kind of really hold up on what's actually happening in physical retail. And, you know, we know that there's a lot of inventory in the supply chain. You know, I think that's pretty much everybody in retail except, you know, if you're in toilet paper or toothpaste, you know, has lots of inventory of stuff that people just haven't been out shopping. So I think we're not really going to get a clear picture on, you know, what's going to happen into next year, early next year, until probably that November, December timeframe.
Now we've seen this idea that it's all about the eyes, and that's kind of where the consumer is focused, but the data might suggest otherwise. What are you seeing in terms of demand for product?
Yeah, so we collect a lot of data. So we have lots of multiple sources that we collect data, and we use that data, you know, to kind of give briefings to our clients on what's happening with trends on products, on categories. And we do that at a global level. So, you know, if we're going to think how the pandemic kind of started out in Asia, well, China was basically back up and running, back normal kind of traffic, normal kind of retail around about the early May time. But it was very clear that the products that people were buying were very different to pre-COVID. So we saw basically a cliff drop on products like lipsticks. And of course, mascara, eyeliner, anything eye focused was skyrocketing. I mean, mascara has been a difficult category for quite a while. You know, it's a difficult product to make, and you know, there aren't many companies that actually do a lot of mascara. Now, you know, it's probably the hottest selling item at the moment is mascara products. But again, you know, I think we'll see as time goes on, you know, a return to normality, you know, where people are starting to use makeup over, you know, the whole of their face, not just necessarily maybe areas that you can only see if you're wearing a mask. Yeah.
That's really interesting if we think about just kind of demand and around holiday from not just a product perspective, but, you know, kind of who is, you know, kind of leading those products, whether it's, you know, kind of the indies or more of the heritage brands. Where are you seeing kind of pockets of strength, and what do you think is driving that?
I think definitely our indie clients, you know, they tend to be first of all, they're generally more digital focused. So, you know, with the disruption that happened in physical retail, a lot of the indie brands go direct to consumer through their own platforms or through, you know, platforms like Ulta or Sephora, etc. So, you know, we didn't necessarily see that it wasn't difficult, and the impact wasn't as, you know, obvious to, you know, the more heritage brands that tend to rely a lot on wholesale channels, big department stores, etc. So I think those indie brands that tend to be more digital savvy. They tend to be more agile. The order quantities when they place orders with us are significantly smaller, and they're doing many more iterations through a year of products than the the heritage brands, the big brands, if you like. So I think that agility allowed them to then kind of play into what was trending. But the trouble that they had was the supply chain, because a lot of the components that they needed were coming out of Asia or coming out of Europe as they were locking down or opening up. Even hand sanitizers are an interesting one. We make a lot of PPE product anyway, so this created an opportunity for us to kind of piggyback on what was happening. But with hand sanitizer, we couldn't get packaging. We couldn't get the little pump dispensers to put them in. That was the problem. So we had plenty of sanitizer, but nothing to actually putting it. And in one place, we actually left it. We have these big bulk containers that we mix into. We actually put the bulk container on the back of a truck and drove it to a hospital and was filling up the sanitizer in the hospital, because we said, well, we can't get the packaging. They probably don't want the packaging. Let's just go and fill them up. So that, that packaging became, is still a problem. It's still difficult to get packaging out of Asia and out of Europe as well. The shipping, a lot of this stuff goes by ship. And as you know, a lot of ships are sailing empty. We have stuff that, gets loaded on a ship and gets pulled off a ship because somebody wants to pay an extra $1,000 to get their container on. There's still a lot of disruption in that supply chain. So great that you have a digital presence and you can pivot very quickly to your clients, but ultimately the supply chain and the ability to get components is what's holding everybody up at the moment.
So if we think about kind of putting, which obviously is most cost effective, onto the water, we've heard that more and more companies whom we wouldn't have expected have turned to air freight. What are you saying from that perspective?
Yeah, I think, again, where brands see an opportunity, and they're willing to pay, putting on a plane. I mean, within the industry as a norm anyway, if it's indie brands tend to be, faster through their process, but also making decisions at the very, very last moment. And a lot of their stuff tends to end up going on an aircraft. Historically, I'd probably say that the cost differential was not that significant, but now it's a huge differential. So, brands are paying that. They're paying through the nose to get it on a plane, to get it in, because there's an opportunity in the market to differentiate themselves or take advantage of an opportunity. But even getting air freight spaces is really challenging. It's difficult from a pricing perspective, but it's difficult to get space because, again, somebody else may be willing to pay an extra $1,000 to get their container on an aircraft, so your stuff gets taken off. But one of the things, because we own that whole process end to end, we try to not separate that as much as possible with our clients. That gives us that ability to kind of, with that convenience power, to try and maintain these supply chains for our clients as we go through this period. But it's challenging. It is challenging both on sea and air at the moment.
Steve, since you've got not only the perspective from the beauty industry, but also, kind of what's happening in PPE, and I think a really great kind of top down, as you think about, looking into the first quarter of 21, where might we be surprised along the way, either kind of positively or negatively as it relates to demand?
I think fragrance is it's been down considerably. I think fragrance is going to come back up. When you think about it, fragrance is 70% alcohol. So I think the idea of kind of spraying yourself with alcohol and walking around, as a counter, kind of as a barrier to COVID-19, I think is going to be touted by some brands for sure. I think that eyes is going to continue to be strong, I think, as people get used to wearing masks. But even in Asia, if you go to economies like Japan, where wearing masks is a norm, wearing a full makeup underneath the mask is normal as well. I think here people just at this point are just not used to wearing masks. And so they think, oh, well, there's no point in putting lipstick on because I'm going to put it on. I think that will change. And I think, all of the categories in beauty will come back up during the holiday season. And then I think as we go into 2021, I think, we'll start to see a plateau and getting back to some degree of normality, but I don't think at the same volumes. I think simply because there's still a lot of hesitancy. People have a lot of, inventory at home. Stores have a lot of inventory as well.
Well, that has been the really interesting phenomenon. And Steve, I've talked about this. If we look back at kind of the last crisis, the global recession, there was, significant destocking. People are kind of like grabbing into the back of their beauty drawers. I feel like we haven't seen that thematically as much this time. What do you think's happening in the consumer's mind? Yeah,
I mean, I think we all saw the news about toilet paper, right? And part of our business, we also make toothpaste, and our toothpaste facility here in the US has been flat out since day one. People were panic buying toothpaste. I think there's kind of day-to-day commodities, toilet paper, toothpaste, deodorants, shampoos, or that kind of, people have stockpiled that. And I think that, in the back end of the year is going to impact a lot of people. I saw some statistics that there's the amount of toothpaste that was purchased in the first quarter of this year was equal to everybody having about 3 years worth of supply at home now. So I think that's going to obviously then impact as we go into the back end of the year for sure, and into next year and probably for a while, I would think.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I want to go ahead and turn it over to audience Q&A. We have quite a few questions, and if anybody still would like to ask, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Our first question is from Agnes. Steve, can you please elaborate on what elements of technology the beauty industry should invest in moving forward?
Well, I think, we've always pushed a lot about trying to collect as much information about the consumer as possible. As I said earlier, most of the brands tend to work through wholesale distribution channels and don't necessarily have a direct connection to the consumer as you would in own retail, for example. So creating an ability to be able to get direct feedback from consumers around what products they're interacting with, creating that direct connection, and then creating that ongoing, I think is an area that we see a lot of growth that we've seen historically, but I think we're going to see more of that going forward. So that's putting QR codes onto the product, embedding NFC into the products, RFID, et cetera, but then creating in-store experiences that are digital and allow consumers to kind of get to know more about the products without physically having to interact with them.
This is an interesting question. Thank you, Steve. Is the fine fragrance sampling kind of arena, is there like an end of the traditional tester bottles? Are there any discussions for how to allow customers to try new fragrances?
Yeah, so, one of the areas that we pivoted to very, very early on, and again, it's a technology that we've had in our portfolio for a few years, was a touchless fragrance dispenser. And not just for fragrances, but also for skincare products and, multiple viscosities. So we have a capability that we're rolling out with several clients globally at the moment, which is an in-store, very small footprint, allows you to put, the physical product into the unit, and then basically to be able to dispense that touchless for consumers to be able to actually, sample the different products. It's something, as I said before, that, kind of brands have historically said, no, I want the sales associate to stand there and spray people, but people don't want to do that anymore, right? Consumers don't want that. So, this is a way that we fill that gap with a very simple, technology that's very easy to roll out. And they say we're rolling out with multiple clients globally at the moment.
That's really interesting. All these questions, I think, are for the most part on technology. The next one, how do you feel about product digitalization through NFC?
Yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, it's a great capability to be able to create a connection between, a brand and a consumer. That normally you wouldn't be able to do physically in a retail location. So, the consumer can get, from a simple tap of the product, can get, all the information that they could get, from spending an hour talking to a beauty associate. Plus, we're collecting a lot of data in that experience. We know what the product is. We know how often it's being tapped. We know the location. There's a lot of information we could collect that we can then feed back to the brand as well to help them guide, decisions around inventory, the supply chain, products, etc., through the development cycle. So I think NFC is absolutely is a huge opportunity for the beauty industry. We have clients who are adopting it, have adopted it, and they've seen great success from that. And it's easy for us because we make the packaging. So for us to embed it into the packaging is very, very easy at the very beginning of the process. For other people, it's difficult because, again, they're not making everything. Then they're not doing everything within the business. So NFC, absolutely.
This next question is a really interesting one. It's a topic we really haven't touched on. What is the strategy pursued in luxury retail, but I think in all of beauty, to drive low carbon? And maybe just what are you seeing around sustainability?
Yeah, again, a lot of this packaging, recycled packaging materials have been around for a long time. Historically, I would say that our clients, haven't been comfortable with the look of the end product. So you start to then, kind of make it look better by adding other things onto it, which doesn't really I think probably I'd say the biggest change that's probably being driven around sustainability is two things. One is, is really a globalization of the supply chain. So much more making, onshore manufacturing, making it closer to the consumer. So not needing to put it on aircraft or put it on ships and ship it halfway around the world. That's one area. The other one is there's a big shift towards glass as a packaging product instead of plastic.
Huh.
And the reason is very simply is that, the plastic recycle industry is still not mature. It's difficult to get certification, that a product is truly PCR. There are very few companies where you can get that. But glass is a very mature recycle model. Everybody's used to going to the bins and putting their bottles in, separating them into the colors. There's a very mature supply chain behind that to pull it in, recycle it, and then put it back into the market. Plus, it's silica based, so if you do dispose of it, it's over time, it's going to erode back to its, back into sand, back into dust again. Takes a long time, obviously. But there's definitely a huge shift at the moment with a lot of our clients in wanting to go away from plastic and actually into glass.
That's interesting. One question we've gotten from several in the beauty industry is about, and I don't know how it works in this kind of current pandemic environment, but this idea of, like you said, more glass, and then the ability to kind of go in and refill. So kind of they truly feel like they're, kind of really contributing. So it's not just, kind of the retailer or the brand, it's also the consumer. And what are you seeing there? And is that maybe just on hold right now?
No, I think, again, we've had refillable, capabilities again for years. The kind of the Nespresso model, I think you've seen a couple.
Oh, I know it well.
Yeah, I mean, so you've seen a couple of products launched recently, which followed that, which was my nice looking package is I can buy like a Nescafe thing that just sticks back up in the top. I peel off the top when I start to use it again. So, again, they're wanting to, for sure, go in that direction. I think that, a couple of brands have launched an in-house mixing capability, for foundations, etc. I think there's going to be more and more and more, technology coming out that allows you to do more of this at home in a more recyclable way, if you like. So, not necessarily you need to build a factory that, can make all of the products, but there's a lot of technology out there that is built around, being able to create a lipstick on a tabletop. And you can just see that technology is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller as time goes on. And, for sure, I think, that kind of day where, you're able to make a lot of the product yourself at home is going to come.
So I'll close it out with one last question, and there are still many left. But it's interesting because if we can tie it back to the poll, where do you find yourself shopping the most? 75% was higher than I expected online. 25% said of mix or both. And then we had a question around sales channel expansion about, online and offline, kind of how are you really thinking about it? So it is really interesting in terms of at least where the consumer is, and then versus where the retailer is, and still a bit of I think a disconnect, because, right, everyone is thinking about like omni-channel versus kind of online plus offline and kind of next gen commerce. What are you seeing, Steve? Because to me, this is probably the most interesting topic, and still one that, I think we've had to get to faster than we might have otherwise, and, many differences of opinion.
Yeah, I think, I'll be honest and say a lot of beauty brands are still, indie brands are very digital focused. Yeah, they're very digital savvy. They tend to go straight out to market, direct, online, and maintain that channel. And then they kind of expand into brick and mortar. But the heritage brands, are the opposite. They're very small on the digital. They tend to rely on digital through other players in the market. I think what you're going to see is them wanting to bring that in-house more and more and more. I think what you saw in fashion probably 10 years ago, with them starting to move out of these license and wholesale models and moving to opening their own stores and direct to consumer, I think you're going to see an acceleration of that now within the beauty industry. Some of them are already, way ahead. But there are still a lot of them that still just rely on, consumers going to department stores to buy. And if consumers are not going to do that anymore, they need to understand that now really driving digital directly themselves, is how they need to invest in order to maintain their presence in the market.
Yeah, no, Steve, I mean, you bring up so many good points here. Thank you so much for all of your time. We definitely have so much more to talk about, especially as we go into holiday and kind of 1Q planning. We hope to see all of you next Tuesday for a really kind of leverages our discussion today, decoding customer data to redefine success in category management, with CEO and founder of Centricity, Michael Brackett. And as a reminder, this and all previous webinars are available on our website to see again. And Steve, thanks so much. This was an amazing conversation. We really appreciate it.
No, thank you, Deborah. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Take care.
Great.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.